It's the Trump Tyranny Tracker on Monday, June 16th. It's so good that everyone's joining us. What a weekend this was. It was so great to see so many people out in the streets on Saturday for No King's Day. A remarkable effort. I mean, over 2,100 more protests around the country, and something like 12 million people is what they estimate showed up. It really lit the fire of many people because it certainly gives us a lot more hope for a real people-driven opposition to the Trump administration. What were your thoughts, Olga, as you were participating and watching?
I absolutely am so proud of Americans because this is exactly the display I've been calling for. We've had, several protests now, but the fact is that this was the headlines around the globe, that people saw that Americans were coming out, and I mean, literally over 2,000 protests. The Americans were coming out to reject fascism, to reject, the sociopath and whatever. And this is exactly what we need more of, because it was, it went. For the most part, the whole day was flawless. You had a lot of people from all age groups, backgrounds participating. And I mean, I saw red states, with crowds bigger than Trump's parade. And I was like, this is amazing. This is what we need because this gives the world hope that the American people are fighting back. And just to add one last thing, I found my favorite poster online.
Yeah.
Someone made a poster and it said, if you're going to treat us like Russia, we will fight like Ukraine. And I
saw you posted that, and I thought that was a very, very good poster,
yes.
really smartly worded and hopefully very true. The split screen that you mentioned there between the No Kings events, which had thousands of people in the streets, and then the parade,
Millions.
which was just empty and bad, and soldiers that weren't marching in step on purpose. I mean, that seems to be what was going on. They deliberately did a bad job, and he looked sad and pathetic and rained on, and even Melania was sort of laughing at him. So you've got this sort of the split screen, which is exactly the opposite of the one he wanted. He was trying to project power, and he just looks weak and without any support because there was no one there to support him. Meanwhile, the opposition numbers are massive. Hundreds of thousands of people in some of these locations. That's it's a lot of people when you really visualize it. And some of those drone shots from above, oh my God, they really inspire you, and you can see how this is building. And, the next time they do it is going to be even bigger. And at some point, hopefully they'll bring it all together into one big thing. So it's quite impressive. And that split screen was kind of like nice to see. I mean, I wouldn't lie.
I even saw one poor soldier marching with a drone over his head. He was like holding a drone. I'm like, what is he doing? And honestly, I felt so bad because, look, I mean, he made our military, our army look pathetic, with this display. Because, there was zero energy. There were no crowds. No one's clapping. You can actually hear, like, the screeching of tires because there was no people there.
Traffic.
The tanks are rolling down. But, and Russia even made, a video. They were mocking this the whole weekend, and they made a video like, Trump ordered this, and it was like, North Korean soldiers marching along and got this, and then a view of ours. And it's kind of true. But then, what makes me happy is that the American military, they're not trained for this, spectacle and these theatrics. We have the most lethal force on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need to march in line and to project strength. They can obliterate Russia, wipe it off the face of the earth, literally, in the 3 days that Putin, thought he was going to capture Ukraine. Our military can do it. And
those guys can march. Those guys know how to march. They just chose not to march because it was a silent protest. They didn't want to be there any more than, it was parading for him. than anything else. And I think that's a very important message. I think that the military was telling America and the world they are not behind Donald Trump. And so this guy who's trying to project power with the military, he's finding out that the military is not behind him. And it was, they all showed up because they had to show up, but they know how to march. And if they needed to, I mean, that's the first thing you get drilled in when you get to boot camp is how to march. They know how to march. They may not do it every day, but
Yeah.
they know that
But they
they know
don't
how to do
need
it.
to march because
Yeah,
we're a democracy. We don't
exactly.
need to flex our strength.
Yeah.
We use diplomacy to try to achieve things. And when that doesn't work, then we have the capabilities to, literally carry out any operation that is needed. And that's the point. I mean, even Marco Rubio was like yawning and like,
I mean, it looked like a parade for like a small African country. It didn't even look like they had the weapon power.
they would have had better theatrics than
Yeah, it's true. Well, let's get into the Trump tyranny tracker for today. It's day 147 of the administration, and we begin with a really disturbing story out of the White House. So the White House and the Department of Homeland Security have shared an image urging Americans to report foreign invaders via an ICE tip line. The graphic was originally created by a white nationalist user who praised Hitler and uses racial slurs online. When the administration reposted this content, the original creator celebrated, saying, quote, "Our efforts are coming out of the White House." That's unbelievable. This represents a direct pipeline from white nationalist propaganda creators to right to the top of the U.S. government. I mean, what can you say about this? It's very disturbing, and it's obviously not a coincidence.
No, it's not. And I mean, this was a one-off, then, we could say, oh, they made a mistake. But the fact is that this is, a repetition of them installing white supremacists, Christian nationalists, and Nazi sympathizers into every agency. Using the rhetoric, I mean, Trump, campaigned on, getting rid of the vermin. Who would call immigrants and, marginalized groups this? Hitler. So, I mean, the fact that they're using, image created by, a Nazi sympathizer, another one, is not shocking. But this just shows you that they're trying to put not only a white nationalist agenda in domestic politics, but they're also doing it with in foreign affairs. And, we had discussed the re-immigration office, which basically is Nazi ideology, far-right extremist ideology to cleanse the country out. It's ethnic cleansing. And this is what our State Department now, basically has. So, I mean, none of this is shocking. It's disgusting. But, I mean, let them keep doing it because, the more they show people who they are, the more, especially with people now paying attention, not to the grocery prices, last year during election, but now paying attention to them solely, that they're in power, the better it is. Let them show who they are because, let's see how many people are comfortable with this.
And as we're finding out in our Authoritarianism 101 series, this is really about creating the fear of the other. This is about speaking to the base and making sure that they feel vulnerable and scared so they keep supporting them. And, that's the sad thing about it is it seems to have worked amongst the base and it still keeps working amongst the base, which is why they put it out there. Moving to our second story, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told Congress that the Pentagon has plans for any contingency, including military takeovers of Greenland and Panama. When pressed by Representative Adam Smith about whether this included invading Denmark, Hegseth didn't deny it, saying military plan is prepared for whatever's needed. This comes as Trump has repeatedly stated, we'll get Greenland. Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is imperialism gone crazy if they think they're going to invade Denmark, but, they obviously have plans. Then they should have plans.
And that's the scary part that, he put it into record by testifying that they do have military plans against a NATO member. So where does this leave NATO? Where does this leave us? And I mean, it's instead of Trump focusing on Russia, Iran, China, which are the real threats, North Korea, he's focusing on, threatening our allies, threatening invasion of our allies. And I mean, as a result, from all of this, we have, the French President Macron, who had to show up to Greenland to send a message to, the United States that we will defend Greenland, even if your military comes in here. And he had said it prior, that if America sends military in, that the French troops will go there. So, I mean, this again is disgraceful. Of what is happening. And yes, I heard from Julie. She is, thank God, safe. And we will see everyone on Thursday for our Pax Americana.
As you mentioned NATO and the G7. Well, you didn't mention the G7. I should say the G7 is happening today in Alberta. There was this crazy statement that Trump put out earlier on today about NATO, about Russia and NATO. He says they threw Russia out, which I claimed was a very big mistake, even though I wasn't in politics. Then I was very loud about it. It was a mistake in that you spend so much time talking about Russia, and he's no longer at the table. So it makes life more complicated. But you wouldn't have had the war. He said you basically would not have had the war if Russia was still part of the G7. That is warped thinking, of course, because that's why they were kicked out in the first place, is the war.
All I can say is that Carney's face, I mean, he literally, you saw his jawline tensing up. Again, so you have a U.S. president. I mean, this is humiliation for the United States. I really don't, honestly, I can't wait to get out of this timeline and, go back to some normalcy. You have the U.S. president who, went to the G7 and is lobbying for Russia again. Again, he did this the first term when he was at the G7, that Russia should have never been kicked out and they should have been here. A reminder, Russia was kicked out because they invaded Ukraine. This is why they were kicked out. And frankly, the G7 really temporarily should turn to the G6 because we have no business being there. I mean, the fact that a U.S. president is standing on the world stage with our allies. He refused to sign on to their statement condemning Iran. He refused to, sign on to lowering the oil cap from $60 to $45 because he can't piss off his, Putin. I mean, we literally have a Kremlin puppet. Stooge standing.
But you're seeing the authoritarian group. We're seeing them come out. Their masks are off. We know who they are. Donald Trump, not calling for de-escalation in Iran and Israel is unheard of, really. I mean, has any American president ever not done something like that? I mean, it seems crazy that you would want to de-escalation. And then these comments about Russia are just, so obviously scripted by the Kremlin, delivered by him, that he's just there as a mouthpiece, for Vladimir Putin. It's kind of shocking that we're sitting here in the midst of all these wars brewing. Our third story marks what appears to be a historic first. U.S. Marines in L.A. detained civilian veteran Marcos Leal after he crossed caution tape near a federal building while heading to a VA appointment. He was zip-tied and held for over 2 hours without charges. Military experts say this appears to be the first time active-duty Marines have detained a U.S. citizen on American soil. Well, that's a horrible first, that the Marines are detaining U.S. citizens on American soil. This guy's going to a VA meeting, and, he gets arrested.
I laugh because it's the incompetency that is going to save us.
Yeah.
I mean, you have U.S. Marines who have no business being there and don't want to be there. And they're not trained for this. When they signed up to be Marines, it was to go to the streets of, Los Angeles or New York or Chicago. I mean, it was to go overseas.
Yeah.
And the fact, I mean, it's horrible because it has the guy who was detained was black. I mean, you have, Marines detaining a black man.
Optics are
And
horrible.
only to realize that he was, not only a U.S. citizen, but he's also a veteran. And he had an appointment at the VA, at the federal building. That's why he was there. But the fact that this is their first detainment on U.S. soil, they didn't detain someone, who's burning a car or putting graffiti up on, a wall or doing anything like that. The fact that the first person they detained is the veteran. I mean,
on his way to a VA meeting. I mean, it's just like just doing the right thing, doing everything he's supposed to do, going to a federal building to have the services he's meant to get, and the Marines themselves are busy detaining him. I mean, that's
And it's just, I mean, again, if the veterans had detained someone burning a car, maybe, the opinion across the country will be like, well, look, they're stopping, a car being burned, whatever. But the fact, I mean, this again, in public opinion, like, really, this is what we need veterans to detain, I mean, Marines to detain veterans. I mean, it just serves them right that was the first U.S. citizen
maybe they did it
detained.
knowingly as well. Who knows? Maybe they were just making a statement, but I doubt that. Our final story focuses on the escalating militarization of American cities. This is a really interesting story. U.S. Customs and Border Protection has confirmed that they're flying military-grade Predator B drones over L.A. to aid federal law enforcement, including ICE, amid mass protests. These drones, typically used in war zones, are equipped with powerful surveillance tools and are operating alongside 700 active duty Marines and nearly 4,000 federalized National Guard troops. But these drones are very sophisticated at surveillance. I mean, they could probably pick out anyone in the crowd and identify them right away. And probably with Palantir and everything else on the back end, this is probably invading the rights of individual citizens who are protesting on a regular basis.
I know. And my take from this story is, one, I mean, this is a police state. That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
But two, that, Democrats and independents, and frankly, anybody who cares about the First Amendment needs to start screaming as loud about the First Amendment as the right has been screaming about the Second Amendment for decades, because this is a complete violation. Last time I checked, the First Amendment gives you freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. And the fact that they are using military drones to monitor protesters who are assembling, and it is their right as part of the Constitution to come out. I mean, we see where this is going. And this is just the beginning, because this will spread across the country. And this is, like I say, LA is the test case. Immigrants are the test case. International students, to see how far they can expand their, executive power.
They're expecting people to get normalized to the idea that these Predator drones are flying over major cities, and that it's okay, for them to be cross-referencing them against facial recognition systems or the entire Palantir database or whatever else they've, attached to that Palantir network that they've built inside the government. That to me is terrifying. If people get used to this idea that government drones can be flying over them, identifying who they are, scanning them for a suspicious activity or any activity, never mind, and then, cross-referencing them against all this data that they have inside the government. This is, it's so pernicious. And if it becomes normal practice under everyday rule in the United States, it ends the ability to have freedom of expression. It ends the ability to freely organize, to have your own opinions, to really move around as well. I mean, these things can track you wherever you go. So it's really one of the most important issues I think that people need to start yelling about is about the privacy and about the invasion of privacy and the scaling back of the freedom of expression rights.
Yeah, and this is, in combination, this is exactly what Russia is like. And, unfortunately, not too many Americans understand how Russia operates, especially the ones cheering this on as someone in the comments. But this is exactly it. And what's interesting is that, um, people who cheer this on don't realize that it will come after them, because when, as long as you support the regime, you're fine. But at any point that you start disagreeing, because Americans are used to, being able to disagree on issues, criticize the leaders in office, criticize their actions, the minute you start criticizing it, you could be the biggest champion and you will get kicked out. And we reaffirmed this a few weeks ago when the OAN, anchor, and that's a far right. I mean, it doesn't get more far right than this. When the anchor criticized why the Pentagon was, basically putting,
Journalists controlling who
cutting
had
the
access.
media,
Yeah,
and she got fired.
yeah.
So, I mean, it just shows you this. And then this is all happening in tandem with, Marines on the street, with military on the street. I mean, this is exactly, what a police state looks like.
Trump wants total adherence. He wants people to view him as the ultimate dictator, the leader, and he doesn't want anyone opposing him. So anyone who thinks that this is not going to affect them down the line, every time they say anything against any government official or anything like that, is wrong. These surveillance drones are very, very effective, and they really impinge on our ability to move around freely and express ourselves in these really complicated times. Olga, we should talk about tomorrow night, because we're having our next session in the Authoritarianism 101 series that we're doing. Last time was so good. So many interesting points of view that came out from different people. And it'll be great to hear from everybody tomorrow after the No Kings protests on the weekend. People will probably be a little bit enthused, have a little bit more, real excitement about them. So, but we're also still going to do the work of going through all these signs of what an authoritarian government looks like. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, tomorrow is all about how the authoritarian governments create the enemy, create the other. So tell us a little bit about what more people can expect and where they can register.
So basically, tomorrow's going to discuss creating the enemy, and we'll talk into how Russia, when Putin came in, he consolidated power, and the reason he was able to do so successfully was by creating enemies, creating national emergencies, and then expanding his power, under the guise of protecting national security. And with Trump, you see the same exact thing. I mean, it started, with immigrants. Now they're detaining legal immigrants. Anyone who is brown or black is being detained, whether you're here with legal status, illegal status. American citizens have been detained. And basically, for them, for an authoritarian to succeed, they need to polarize the country. They need to divide people. And one of the ways of doing this is by creating the other, by, creating the enemy. And for Trump, for instance, as much as he carries on about we need to deport every single last immigrant in America, he should start with Mar-a-Lago and with all his properties that he employs them. There have been countless records of him employing Guatemalans and Mexicans and others for labor for his resorts and businesses.
By the way, just before we got on the air, I think he actually put in an exemption for workers, because there's no one picking the plants for the food that we need in a lot of these agricultural sectors and in other commercial sectors. So before we went on the air, Trump said he was going to rewrite those rules so there would be no workplace invasions of ICE.
And you know why?
Yeah,
because his donors called.
Yeah, freaking out. We have no staff. No one's here. No one can pick up food.
Why.
Yeah.
Exactly. This is why, because it's hotel donors and, all the other donors who continue to give him money said, what are you doing? Why is I showing up at our hotels, at our restaurants? I mean, even, what is his name? Kid Rock. Kid Rock's restaurant had undocumented immigrants working. And when ICE was raiding there, they told the undocumented staff to go home so they can get caught up.
Unbelievable that, we're living in this day and age. But the Authoritarianism 101, people can register. It's for paid subscribers only. You can register on the Trump Tyranny Tracker or at Unmasking Russia or on narrative.org. I'm going to repost the link in a news story today so people can really find it near the higher up. It's free for anyone who's a paid subscriber, which is, I guess, a weird way of saying it. But tomorrow night at 8 p.m., everyone could join, but you have to register. And so please follow the registration link. It was quite busy last time, and you should register early if you really want to get in to tomorrow night's session. I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be great to catch up with everybody.
I know, me too. It's going to be fun.
Well, that's the Trump Tyranny Tracker for today. I'll be back at 3, just in 35 minutes from now, with Dean Blundell with the 5-sec, the 5 biggest stories of the day. There's lots to catch up on, and he's fired up about the G7, so we're going to hear about that. Plus, everyone should subscribe to the Trump Tyranny Track. If you're not yet subscribed, you're missing the most authoritative guide to how Trump's authoritarian creep is happening. It's a hard sentence. In America. So check out Olga's incredible work and please support her through your subscriptions, free and
likewise.
And you can see me on narrative.org where you could do the same thing. So there you go. That's the Trump Tyranny Tracker for today. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.